Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Goose Show, where we go over all the news for the past week and then talk about a topic that's specific to Savage Worlds. So let's go get started. I apologize, there is some static. I'm having some problems again with my microphone and everything. And last time I moved things, everything disconnected. So I apologize if there is any static, but as always, we're going to start with the newsletter. We're going to go and talk about the Kickstarters that are going on, any other news that's happening, and then our main topic today is talking about touch attacks. There we go. Not touch attacks, touch power specifically, actually, and how those work, and how they've changed even with inside of Savage Worlds Adventure Edition, how things have changed there. So we're going to talk about that and kind of go over my thoughts on the situation and how I'd like to do things, and kind of just set my thoughts. But first, we'll start with the newsletter. So let's go ahead and share that tab here. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Oh, here we go. All right, make this up a little bit bigger at least. So the big news, as you can expect, is that hey, June 4th, the launch of the Kickstarter for the Bestiary 2 and Advanced Player's Guide 2 for Pathfinder for Savage Worlds, in which we are going to be getting some more ancestries like the Efreet, Sylph, and Undyne. New class edges like Gunslinger, Magus, and Ninja. Some new gear, new weapons, new powers, new magic items, new mechanics like spell duels, which sounds awesome, and I'm super excited. And construct creation, which I feel like it's going to be really important for like artificers, or like depending on how you are planning on playing out artificers. So that's really cool. They do say here that this is coming, a lot of stuff's coming from their Ultimate Wilderness, Ultimate Combat, and Ultimate Magic source books that were originally made for Pathfinder First Edition. So we're seeing more of that, like just taking Pathfinder First Edition content and then converting all of that into Savage Worlds in some way. And so far, it's been really good. So that's exciting. I am excited to see some of the art that we can see on these books here. So we got like some sort of beast from the Bestiary. Unless front here looks, I want to say it's not dragon, definitely not a dragon. It almost looks like a dragon-esque. I'm sorry, I don't know my Pathfinder lore here as much to know what that is. Then we see some other cool art for the Advanced Player's Guide. Take on some awesome monsters there. So that looks like a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. So that's next Tuesday. So next Tuesday we'll probably talk about it a little bit. And actually, maybe that'll be next week's topic, is talking about the books for next week, and also what we might hope for and what things we'd like to see in these books, as well as what we'd like to see in the future for Pathfinder for Savage Worlds. All that being said, we're going to move on to the next announcement that the Savage Worlds 20th Anniversary Celebration Pledge Manager is closing. They've kind of finished up everything they need for the previous Kickstarter. And so the 20th Anniversary Celebration, one of which included a lot of exclusive things that were like specifically to this Kickstarter. So if you're interested in getting any of those things from this Kickstarter, you need to go through the Pledge Manager, and there's going to be a lot of things that are not going to be available. I imagine that the player's guides, that the player books they've made will still be available. I wouldn't be surprised if they stop making maybe all different covers, and maybe they'll decide like one cover that everyone seems to enjoy the most and just stick with that one. But there is going to be there's like 5 different covers, I believe, for this. I only got one of them. I think like each of my players got one, and then they all got different ones. So there's that. But there is a lot of things in this Kickstarter that is exclusive to this Kickstarter. If you want them, you need to get on the Pledge Manager if you did not already back the campaign. Additionally, this is also a reminder to everybody who did back it. One, even if you didn't back it, just check to make sure you didn't actually back it. And then 2, to make sure that you actually fulfilled the pledge, like went through and did the Pledge Manager, and make sure that like everything's done there. Because like they said, they want to honor all pledges. But after this campaign is fulfilled, we will no longer hold stock and reserve for uncompleted pledges of certain items. It doesn't say certain items, but like if more items are unavailable, we will provide a store credit instead of the original pledge item. Now, that doesn't mean like there are, like I said, I'm pretty sure they're planning on keeping some of these things. Just not everything. I imagine, like I said, that the player's book they're going to keep making because that's a cool product. A nice thing for like people to get their players to kind of get into Savage Worlds. But make sure you got that Pledge Manager all filled out. I'm going to double check it mine. I'm pretty sure I double checked it like 3 times now, but I'm going to double check it again just to make sure that everything's correct and we're all good and there's not going to be any problems. If you are fans of Foundry, which I think it was like last week I learned that Foundry is like super young compared to like Fantasy Grounds and everything. Jody, or no, that's a different thing. Yep, no. I think I said I was talking about Jody earlier. I'm not sure where. Anyways, our community devs said they have released Savage Worlds Adventure Edition 3.4 for Foundry on version 11. I hope this makes sense to you guys all. But they are reiterating that for the 4th anniversary of Foundry, there is 25% off their online store for this platform. So go check that out if you use Foundry. I personally use Albar Rodeo when I play online, which is not very often, so not for me. If you are in the UK and you're going to the UK Games Expo, that is this coming weekend, go check out all the cool Savage stuff that's going to be there. There's a nice little guide here to see exactly where they're going to be. And I believe I saw something from Imaginarium Games, the creators of the Secret Files Section D. That I believe I saw something about them being there too. So go check them out, or maybe they're going to hang around with the Savage folks. That's possible too. But there's going to be a lot of cool stuff there. So if you're at the Games Expo, wish I was, go check all the Savage Worlds stuff out and stop by the booth. This week, for the Savage Universe, Peter Saloom of Pear Tree Studios, who we had on several weeks ago to talk about adventure design, and he talked about his adventures, Shadows of the Sacred Hills, and the Isilian Hybrid. There we go. He is going to be talking about his adventures on Thursday with JM DeFoggy. So take a look at that. I can never make it to these things because it's during my gameplay, my weekly sessions. So yeah, so go hang out and have fun. Hear Peter talk about more stuff and just enjoy the Savage Worlds community. So the Fantasy Grounds Fridays hosted Bryce and Jody Black. So you can see, I guess, I'm not sure who Bryce is, but I guess Bryce is, I think, the host. Am I correct? Yes. Yeah. From Smiteworks, Bryce Musso. I'm guessing it looks French. Musso. Where's Eric when you need him? Last Friday, Jody sat down with him, talked about Fantasy Grounds Fridays. She talked about Savage Worlds, Legends of Ghost Mountain, Deadlands, Savage Rifts, and she also apparently talked about this is the big news for me from this section, is she talked about the convention plans for demoing Deadlands Dark Ages. Deadlands Dark Ages has been talked about. I think it was first mentioned when SWADE first got released, and they did a one-shot quick start for Deadlands Dark Ages, and it got me super excited for it. And that was how many years ago now? 5 years ago, maybe more. And we still haven't seen it. I've ran through the adventure twice now, and I really enjoyed it. Just kind of like a generic, not generic fantasy, but there's this. I'll say there's Deadlands lore, but I don't think the adventure kind of focuses a lot on the Deadlands lore. But to see that they are working on it, because I was worried they're just gonna dump it. But they are working on it and they are doing demos for it, has got me super excited. So if you're at the Gen Con Indy, go check that out. And she also talks about the Kickstarter for the Pathfinder for Savage Worlds booster. So again, that's next week. So the next thing up is Necessary Evil, and then the 20th anniversary celebration. I imagine that the 20th anniversary celebration is mostly going to go pretty smoothly, since it's mostly the special version of the core rulebook, and then additionally, it is the Player's Handbook, which is just, or Player's Guide, which is just the player stuff from the core rulebook. And it looks, it's not a whole lot of editing or work. It should be pretty simple and straightforward. It's mostly going to be those other rewards. They have to make sure to look good. So I imagine that this is actually going to be a pretty quick fulfillment once the pledge manager closes. So, but we'll have to see about that. Here we go. All right, so just kind of look at your guys' comments. Yeah, Samson says Dark Ages has been on my radar for years too. Yeah, I'm waiting. I've been waiting for it. I actually thought that Dark Ages was going to be the fantasy setting for SWADE, and then Pathfinder came out, so that kind of stopped that from happening. But that's what I was expecting. I was expecting Dark Ages to be the fantasy setting for SWADE. So we're gonna move back over to our little. Oh yeah, see, I gotta make this a little bigger. There we go. Kickstarters. There is only one Kickstarter that I know of, and that is the Pathfinder for Savage Worlds booster, happening on June 4th, next Tuesday. Originally supposed to be 2 weeks ago. It's not. It's this coming Tuesday. But I'm super excited for it. Looks great, and yeah, just excited for it. But I don't actually have anything else when it comes to Kickstarters. It's on Kickstarter, and nor any other additional news. So that brings us talking about touch powers. If you're just joining us, welcome to the Savage Goose. My name's Goose, and today we are talking about how do touch powers work. Should it be a touch attack, or should it be just be the arcane skill roll? And we're just going to talk about that today. And I'm going to go and stop sharing the screen just so we can have a little more room here. There we go. So how should touch powers work? There's actually two different ways that powers work based on the two books. If you look at the core rule book and then look at the Fantasy Companion and then even the Pathfinder books, there I can't remember which way the Pathfinder books lean. I think maybe the Advanced Player's Guide changed things, but we're going to focus on the core rule book and the Fantasy Companion. And I believe that this really does apply to Pathfinder as well. But there was this, and if you look at the core rule book, if you were to take, let's say, Bolt. In fact, let me go ahead and pull up Bolt real quick because I have both PDFs here. Fit this to the width here, and I'll just go ahead and share my screen again. Pull up the Bolt power. Whoop. And hopefully you guys can see that. If not, maybe we can make that a little bit bigger. But there we go. Full width. There we go. All right. So Bolt power says it's 1 point, and also it has a range of smarts times 2. And the bolt does 2d6 damage or 3d6 with a raise. Now, if you were to take a limitation, and limitations basically say that you can do either if you have like an aspect to it, like for instance, boost lower trait, and you only want to take boost, you can reduce the power point cost of the power, but you only can ever use boost unless you retake the power as lower trait. So you can reduce that cost of 3 points to 2. Now, Bolt only costs 1 point. So let's say you wanted to reduce that in some way, which the only way to do that is the range modifier. And so you would take the range, which is currently smarts times 2, and you take it down to touch. Now you can't reduce PowerPoint cost to less than 1, and so what instead you get is a +1 to your Bolt. Now Bolt is the kind of in my opinion, the go-to power to kind of like think about, like, do you want to do in touch? It's basically like I think it's like inflict wounds is one of the powers that you can just like touch someone in D&D and like it hurts them. But that's basically you touch the person and you're doing something that hurts them and drains them in some way. So if you reduce that PowerPoint by taking the touch limitation, you would reduce that to 0, but you can't reduce to 0. So instead, you'll get +1 to your arcane skill roll. Now, the question was always, if you have a power like Bolt at touch, what does that look like when it comes to rolling for what you need to do? Because in one sense, you need to cast the power. You need to roll your spell casting. You'll get that +1 to your arcane skill roll, and so you've activated the power, but you still need to touch someone, which is basically an attack of some sort. And generally speaking, it is a touch attack, and that's kind of like what everyone kind of came up. For the most part, I think what people came to terms with, that's how you would do it. You would do touch and then a touch attack. So cast the power, make sure it activates, and then do a touch attack. And touch attacks get +2 to their attack, to the attack, because you're just trying to touch them. That's all you're trying to do. Theoretically, you could, I believe, and I'm actually just second guessing myself. I can't remember if you can do a wild attack with a touch attack. So theoretically, you get a +4, like just need a touch, and I'm doing it wildly, make myself vulnerable. So there's a possibility you could do a +4, but I think there's something that might prevent that from happening, like a ruling there somewhere. But so down in the comments, remind me if you can do wild attack with touch attacks. I don't think you can, but maybe I'm wrong about that. But anyway, you get the +2, but that does create a multi-action penalty because you are both casting the power and you are doing your touch attack. Now, the +2 from touch attack does negate the fighting roll that you have to make that touch attack, that multi-action penalty. But you still have the problem where you have to cast at a -2 for your arcane skill roll, and you might fail that, and you've already declared two things, and so now you've kind of like wasted your turn in a sense. And that's kind of how this works. And that's reinforced by a power down below. Let me go and pull up teleport. All right, it's teleport down here. And if you look at teleport, where'd it go? Teleport, here we go. Now, teleport is a 2 power point, but there's specifically here a teleport foe. Oop. Accidentally just linked out to touch attacks. Let's go down and teleport again. There we go. Bit width. There we go. So teleport foes says that foes may be targeted by a touch attack. This is an action, so the casting must be the second part of the multi-action if the attack is successful. So which is nice that it's actually that according to this rule, this portion of teleport, and this is like really the only power that I know of in the core rulebook that specifically calls us out, saying like, hey, this is a multi-action thing, but it does also say that you do the attack first and then you use the power, right? But it is a -2. So the foe resists the casting with the opposed skill roll against the arcane skill total, and is sent up to 12 inches away with a success, or 24 inches with a raise. And that makes sense, right? That there is this like, okay, they have to oppose it with against the a spirit roll to kind of like resist the undesired, the resisting of them being teleported far away. So that makes sense. Now in a lot of people didn't like this way of doing things. It did seem to be like the correct core way of running touch attacks or touch spells against opposing creatures, so enemy creatures. Obviously, there's a lot of touch ones that you don't need to roll an attack because it's an ally and you're just trying to boost them real quick. So it's just like roll to boost them, or roll, you're just touching them to heal them, and they're not going to kind of fight you, so you don't need to roll an attack against them. But if you're trying to make it so that someone has to resist it in some way, if there's ever basically a resistance, you also need to do a touch attack in order to touch them and then activate the power. And so the people didn't like that this is 2 rolls, and both rolls are kind of like, you're not really sure which, if it's a multi-action penalty. It's a little strange. Get to roll 2 rolls to actually make things work out. You may activate your power, but now it's just like your hand wants to do a bolt, but you can't touch the person, or maybe it's if it's the other way around in this case of touching the person and then casting a bolt. You're just like, cool, I touched you and then nothing happened because I failed my bolt, and now it's just awkward. So I guess that can create good role-playing experiences in a sense. So, but a lot of people didn't like it because it wasn't fast and it wasn't furious and it wasn't fun. So then we come to the fantasy companion, and real quick, I'm gonna take a break to take a look at the chat real quick, make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah, nope, okay. So the fantasy companion, I'm gonna move over to this tab here, make sure that you guys can see that, and we can see limitations. And they specifically call out in the range section. This is not in the core rulebook. And the range basically just says this part here, the first part, power's range is reduced to touch if its usual range is greater. It's essentially all it says. This specifically calls out that the target of powers activated with the touch limitation must be within the reach of the caster's unarmed attack or natural weapon. The caster rolls his arcane skill, but must meet the target's parry and use this roll as the target's value in any appropriate opposed roll. So basically, they're saying that instead of having a fighting attack and having a arcane skill roll, it's 2 separate things. It's just one thing. You're just basically like using your arcane skill as your fighting roll, and that makes things a lot simpler, right? It's you. And actually, I will note that this is actually interesting wording. It doesn't say that. It does mention that there is the value that you roll is for any appropriate opposed roll, but it also says the touch limitation must be within reach of the cat. It doesn't say like the target of the power, if the opposed target's like any target of a touch limitation must be within the caster's unarmed attack reach, and they must meet their parry. I wouldn't think that most people would assume that, but most people would assume that does not mean that you need to roll to hit your allies' parry if you're trying to heal them with a healing roll. I think most people are going to assume that they mean like an opposed enemy, but some people I could see arguing that this is saying that if you want to use a touch power, like say a touch boost trait, that you have to roll and hit your allies' parry. I don't think that's the intent here. So RAI, I don't think that's what that means. Some people might argue that rules as written, that's what it means, but I don't think that's what they're trying to go for. But the point being, though, is that this does make it much easier. It's one roll, and you can just touch them and do your damage. Now, the problem that I think some people have is that your ability to touch a target that's an enemy really doesn't matter. As far as like realism goes, does not really matter when it comes to being in melee combat. How how can me being good at casting magic have anything to do with my ability to lay hands, not to use a paladin term, but lay my hands on someone to do a bolt or to do any like maybe teleport foe or anything. And actually, let's go and pull up teleport foe here, because teleport foe here does change with this ruling. Let me go and pull up. You see all the ancestry stuff. That's all I want. Nope. Oh yeah, wait, no, Arcane. That's what I want. Whoops. So we come here down to powers. We're going to go to teleport real quick, and you'll see that teleport foe does change here. And this is a reason that if you're using the fantasy companion, you may want to pay attention to the or any other of the companions. If there's multiple versions of powers, you may want to double check which ones are which, because they may have different wordings or different uses. Teleport, for example, has these epic power abilities like Gate and Greater Teleport, whereas this one just has additional recipients and teleport foes. And then down here we have teleport foe, and this is just a range of touch. The foe resists the spell casting within a post spirit roll against the arcane skill total, and is sent up to 12 inches away with a success, and 24 inches on a raise. So it's just saying, hey, use your spirit, use your arcane skill resisted by spirit, right? And there's referring back here to this range again to talk about that. Now, this range, to be clear, something I should have mentioned earlier, is that this range of touch for the power does not get the touch bonus, which I think is good. I think that would be inappropriate. They don't get the touch bonus from a touch attack, because it's not an attack. It's a arcane casting. And so I think that does help kind of like make things a little bit a little more fair, because there really isn't, besides like limiting like bolt down one and therefore getting a +1 to your arcane skill roll, there isn't really a way to get bonuses other than like other magical bonuses and stuff from like weapons or armor, some sort of enchantments, to any sort of bonuses to your rolls. Attacks have a lot of options when it comes to how they can get bonuses. They can get gang up bonuses. They can get wild attack. They get desperate attack. I'm sure there's other things I can't think of right at the moment, but there's other ways to get a lot of different bonuses to your attack rolls or to your fighting rolls for attacks. And there's not for melee attacks, and there's not really any ways for your arcane skill to get those kind of bonuses, except for certain use cases. But there's basically it's gonna be a lot harder compared to fighting rolls to hit parry, because basically your fighting rolls and your arcane skill rolls are both trying to hit this target of parry, and yet parry, the fighting skill has a lot more ability to get itself increased to the point where it's going to be able on a regular roll to hit a certain parry. So, for instance, I think I see parry of 7 quite often. I think it's a pretty common parry that I see. Just trying to think like why that would be. That would be, that's a D10 if you don't have any bonuses. So maybe like 6 is pretty normal. Where you have like a D8 in fighting plus the 2, and then so so D8 in fighting, or even a D6 in fighting, and then you have a rapier to give yourself that 6 parry. So it's easy enough to get like 6, but let's say you have a D8 in fighting. You think you're, even with your wild die, you're likely to get like 5. Your like average is like 5 point something. So on average, you're more likely to miss a target parry of 6 with a D6. Yeah, with a D6. Even with a D8. Sorry, I think about that. Even with a D8, I think your like average is like 5 point something. And so you're likely to miss. And if you don't do like a wild attack or a desperate attack or gang up bonuses or anything like that, so there is going to be less ways. And there are some ways for the arcane skill to get that bonus. Vulnerable would give you that bonus. So they get a +2 if they're vulnerable. So that might be actually a really smart way to do it. But for the most part, they're both trying to hit the same target number of parry with the parry, and it's not going to be as easy for arcane skills versus fighting. So that's one thought there. Looking at the chat real quick to make sure I'm not missing any questions about this. Not sure if Tyler, I'm not sure if I get your question. What does being a spellcaster do with moving your arms around and speaking magic words? I mean, it depends on the spellcaster, but I think that's I'm not quite sure I understand what your question is there, and I apologize if I missed the context with my quoting. If you can do that, can part of that be part of the touch attack? Right. So again, the if you use the fantasy rules, you cannot use the touch attack bonus. Whereas you do if you do the core rulebook way of doing it. You do get the +2, but the +2 is just canceling out your multi-action penalty. If you are, I was gonna say two-fisted, but two-fisted only covers like fighting rolls, so it doesn't really help in this situation. Oh no, wait, yeah, it would only help with fighting rolls. So yeah, that probably doesn't help out there. So the question is at this point, then, just kind of getting back to the point of things, is which should you use? Which one is better? There's going to be some people who are going to say that they like the core rulebook way of doing things because it's more realistic. We'll say, how can why is my spellcast? If your spellcaster has to do touch, they have to touch the person. You clearly need to roll fighting to touch them, not spellcasting. And I get that for sure. I actually faced this kind of same problem with the Alchemist. If you're familiar with the Alchemist from Pathfinder, they are able to throw bombs at people. And instead of just using athletics or shooting, which maybe athletics would be definitely the option for throwing, they actually don't roll athletics to throw their bombs. They use their arcane skill. They use alchemy, the skill alchemy, to throw their bombs, which feels a little bit wrong. Now they are subject to cover. They are subject to I believe they're subject to cover. I'm pretty sure they're subject to cover. And there's even some other ways we can talk about this that where things don't necessarily make sense mechanically, that they make more sense a little more narratively, and we just let it make sense narratively and just be okay with it. So for instance, what I mean by that is if you have someone, let's look at like some weird devices. A lot of weird devices tend to be gun type things that use some sort of magic, right? If you have like a gun of bolt that shoots bolts, if you hand it off to someone, you usually have to use shooting, but the person who made it uses their arcane skill roll. They don't need to be good at aiming. They just have to use arcane skill. If you're trapping of your burst power is that you take a flask and you throw it, say we're not playing with a alchemist, but you're trapping your character as if they're an alchemist, and your burst or your blast power is you throw a little vial and it crashes on the ground and makes a big explosion. Well, you're still not using your athletics roll to do that. You're using your arcane skill roll. And I think there's gonna be some of us who have at first like a negative reaction to that, because like, oh wait, like how can you do that? That doesn't make any sense. You're clearly throwing it. You should be using athletics, but really, it's just a trapping. And if you're going to basically, we don't want to be in a place where we make a certain trapping less fun for our players, right? The trapping, the power works the way it works, regardless of how we trap it. Generally speaking, obviously that. If you trap it as like a fire explosion and or it catches everything on fire, that's gonna be one thing, versus a ice explosion and it freezes everything in the area. There's gonna be different things that happen there with synergies and such. But as far as the activation of power, you can't all of a sudden, because someone chose to make it a vial that explodes, turn it into a athletics roll instead of a spellcasting roll. And that kind of goes again, kind of back into how do we do touch powers, and that we're trying to make it fun. These people are, and they're already kind of balancing it. That's one of the things that I think people were concerned about, or should be concerned about, is how do you balance a touch power, especially since the bolt would get a +1. So if you're saying, oh no, all you need to do is touch someone and I get +1, so I get 5 for my, I just get +1 to my bolt every time I cast it, and there's no downside if I get within melee range. Sorry, I should probably take a drink of water. I've been talking quite quickly, and I apologize if I'm talking too quickly. But we don't want to make it so that people are doing cool things with they're basically trying to make sure that parry still matters in that case. If someone's trying to touch me, I would feel bad if they said, "Oh, yeah, it's a touch attack," and touch power, and all they do is roll 4. As someone receiving that also feels bad. So I think it's nice that they have come up with a quick way to make it one roll, which one makes the game faster. We have to make sure that we are keeping the game fast, furious, fun. And I think that the fantasy way of doing things really is the more fast, furious, fun way to do things. When I first read this, I was actually against it. I was like, oh no, that doesn't feel right. But the more I've read into things, the more I've kind of thought about it and dwelled on it, talked about it to other players. I think the fantasy way of doing things is the correct way to do it. Making it a opposed roll with the arcane skill. Now, I'm happy to hear some opposing views, if you or supporting views. That's fine too. Of that, the question I think some people have though is why is this not been retrofitted yet for the core rulebook? And I think that's probably just has to do with that'd be a major change between the core rulebook and everything else. But yeah. So let's think about how. Let's take a look here and look at some questions here. Tyler says, "Can you use the wizard staff?" Now, the answer is no, because you're not. They do say that it's basically it's a touch. Like it's not. I touch it with my spear or my staff. It's I touch it, and they basically say that it has to be within reach of your unarmed strike. Or your natural weapon. So if you have like long arms or something, the point being is that if you have a natural way of being able to reach out and touch them, then you're good. Not using another weapon. Now, if you want to trap it and say, "Oh, I use my staff to touch it," and they're within the same distance as your arm, I would allow it for narrative purposes, just not mechanically. If you try to use your staff to extend, like, oh, it's 2 inches, of like, okay, we try to make it. Understand, like, okay, I made it so that's fine for narrative reasons, but now you're trying to change the mechanical way things work, and that's not okay. So King's Word of Staff, narratively yes, mechanically no, because narrative can be whatever you want. Can you make it part of the touch attack? Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm sorry, Tyler. Maybe I'll have to just write a longer comment on exactly what you're asking. I apologize. Matthew Senat says, "What is your favorite thing about the touch mechanic?" Honestly, my favorite thing. The touch mechanic. Honestly, the one that this is, if you go with the fantasy settings, I think the touch mechanic actually becomes less useful because I think that was one of the major reasons for touch to exist in the first place. There are other things that use the touch mechanic, like certain weapons, like a taser. Yeah, taser, the one that you jab into people, that uses touch attack, which makes sense. You don't need to like hit them really hard with it. You just need to touch them to make sure that the contacts happen and everything, and that's fine. And that's a +2, which also the taser is really strong. So yeah, look at that. If you're ever running ETU, make sure you use the updated taser from the core rulebook and not the ETU original taser. Because they got a lot stronger. But take a look at that. But I'm trying to think of other use cases like in core rules besides tasers that would use touch attack. And I'm actually kind of I'm not sure. Besides that, and using it for powers. Yeah, so now I'm looking this up because actually you got me thinking, like, what else do we use touch attacks for? That's explanation. What touch attack is? Poisonous touches. Yeah, those also use touch attack stuff. So you have like a poisonous touch as like a character that'll work. But yeah, looking through the core rulebook, there's only like certain monsters use touch attacks for like death touches and stuff, like certain abilities. But as far as what options are available to players, there's a ancestry ability for poisonous touch. There is a the teleport foe, and then even under the touch attack section itself, it says that it's for delivering a magical effect of some kind. Like it says, a character who simply wants to touch a foe, usually deliver a magical effect of some kind, adds +2 to his fighting roll. And that's like it's the main use case for touch attack. So I think touch attack actually becomes a lot less important if you use the new rules from the Fantasy Companion. But I think the Fantasy Companion is the way to go because they're more fun. They don't use touch attack. It's just roll your arcane skill. If you use any bonuses you have, like for them being vulnerable or something, and otherwise you're good to go. Because the vulnerable works at range too. If you're trying to cast bolt from range and they're vulnerable, you also get the bonus from that. So it doesn't really change anything. You're still gonna get the vulnerable bonus. Amsterdam says, which is different than the venomous touch, which requires a more toothy touch type. Yes. Yeah. So I guess like ones like got like poisonous. You've got like sap on your fingers and you touch them and it seeps into their skin. And it's poisonous. And then they have the venomous. Yes, you just got to inject into them. Which I think venomous is a. I think what you're saying though is that there is a option for venomous touch or venomous bite. Is there? Oh no! So actually, poisonous touch says that it's a touch attack or a bite or a claw, and it delivers a mild poison. So they're basically using poisonous and venomous interchangeably. Sorry for those who are offended by that. Let's see here. But yeah, cool. All right. Well, that's kind of my little thoughts about everything. I would love to hear your thoughts on arcane skill plus touch attack versus the new way of doing things with just an arcane skill roll. Like I said, I kind of like I reiterate. I do think that it's more fun to do it the new way. I saw someone posted a really good comment on Reddit when I talked about this briefly about the using the new rules. Let me see. I want to see if I can find that real quick. I personally, this is from Omnificer on Reddit. I personally really disliked the 2-action nature of it when I start and did it the new way before it appeared in the fancy Pathfinder books. While I can fully understand the logic of casting being discreet from making contact, it veers too far outside of fast, furious fun for my taste, and that absolutely makes sense. It makes basically touch powers too complicated. It makes it take more time and makes it so there's a more higher likelihood of failure because you're relying on two rolls to succeed, and that just makes it less fun. And I think the new way of doing it is definitely more fun, more streamlined, and keeps it in line with fast, furious fun, which is what we are all about in Savage Worlds. So thank you for your time, everybody. I appreciate the chat, and if you have any other questions about this, hit me up. Next week, I think what we're going to probably do is talk about the Pathfinder Kickstarter, just because that's going to be releasing. We can look through the Kickstarter and see what's all in there and see what kind of new things we can look forward to, and any other bonuses and such that are going to be in that. And then the week after, we are having Christian from the Immaterial Plane. He is the one who did the Aberrun for Savage Worlds conversion. We're going to talk about that, and we're also going to talk about it in a little bit in the context of how do you go about converting settings that you like into Savage Worlds, and what kind of things do you need to keep in mind when you're doing that. So I look forward to that in 2 weeks, and next week we'll talk about the Pathfinder Kickstarter. Thank you all for joining me. Have a great night, and I will see you next week.